Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today on the Firefighters Podcast, we're delving into leadership and culture. But before you roll your eyes and brace for another bash on leadership, let me reassure you, that's not what this is. In fact, the majority of my interactions with leaders have been really positive. Many of you listening will have had the privilege of working alongside leaders who inspire you, who empower you, and support their teams with integrity, humility, and all that good stuff. But we can't turn away from the undeniable evidence and lived experience of many people listening, including myself at times, that there are some bad apples amongst us. And while the behaviour might not be so overt that it leads to dismissal, it can quietly and persistently suppress, push down, or steal the happiness, potential, and career fulfillment of so many incredible people in our sector. So today we're going to explore why this happens. Why do some people behave this way? How can you recognize these behaviors in your environment? And crucially, what can you do about it if you find yourself working alongside someone who is quietly undermining the culture around them? To help me unpack this topic, I'm going to be guided and joined by Natalie Martinek, PhD. Natalie helps people build relational leadership capacity, supporting those who have been scapegoated, sidelined, or harmed in environments that protect image over people. With a background in developmental biology, she shifted her investigative lens towards workplace power dynamics, exploring how behaviors spread, how influence is wielded, and how some professionals quietly lose standing despite doing everything right. She's worked with professionals all over the world in healthcare, academia, emergency services, and beyond, helping them read the terrain, navigate hidden power dynamics, and build the tools to respond strategically rather than just surviving the workplace. Natalie is also the author of The Little Book of Assertiveness, fantastic short read, and also The Scapegoating Playbook at Work. And she writes a absolutely brilliant Hacking Narcissism on Substack. Go and have a look at that. So together we're going to be exploring why imposter syndrome isn't always about low self-esteem, but often what happens after you've contorted and bent and twisted yourself to fit into something that you realize you were never going to be accepted in. We'll talk about the traits of narcissistic individuals and covert bullies and how they operate inside hierarchical organizations, just like the fire service. We also talk about the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellism, psychopathy, and sadism. Scary stuff, and how these traits show up in people you may be working with daily. We talk about the hidden tactics of soft control that leave you second guessing yourself. You know that feeling when someone else maintains this subtle dominance and you just seem to spiral into questioning yourself. We talk about empathy fatigue and why it's possible to remain in your humanity and compassion across a 30-plus year career in the first responder sector. Is that possible? I don't know. And most importantly, we're going to talk about some practical strategies for recognizing these dynamics and protecting your autonomy and well-being while continuing to serve your team and your community. We're having this conversation because many of you will have felt at some point in time this silent erosion of your confidence or happiness by someone who behaves in these ways. You are not alone. You're not imagining it, and there are things that you can do about it. See you on the other side. So in the fire service, we often talk about lots of things around culture and leadership, but rarely do we dissect the deeper psychological patterns that quietly shape the toxic environment. So I wanted to explore this conversation and these topics with you today because it's something that you write so incredibly beautifully about, and you're really well informed on it. And there's a really uncomfortable growing evidence that traits like narcissism, manipulative soft control, covert bullying, chronic lack of empathy, and these elements are very, very common in our sector, it seems. They're often normalized, sometimes even rewarded, and embedded in a hierarchy. So these elements don't exist out there in the ethereal that are nothing to do with us. They're contributing directly to what I believe is this erosion of trust, the sort of silencing of dissent and burnout that we see in really good people that are trying to do the right thing. They had a passion to join in the sector, and they're sort of stuck up in this unforgiving system. So by unpacking some of these today, because the listener may be looking at the title and thinking, what's this got to do with our sector? I'm not sure, but there's so many things here that if we talk about them openly, I hope we can at least better understand them, because you write so powerfully about them, and why these sort of poor cultures are persisting, and what we can practically do about them. So it's a bold challenge, and I know we've capped ourselves. So for people that aren't sure, it's 5 p.m. in the evening where you are. It's very early in the morning where I am. So we're going to try and punch through these and see how many we get through. You up for the challenge?
I'm up for it. Oh boy. No pressure.
No pressure. We're going to attempt the perfection in utopia, and I think it's achievable. So I wanted to start with something that's come up in a few conversations, perhaps more so with some of the females in our sector, although I wouldn't want to stereotype it too much in that way. And it's this thing around imposter syndrome. You say that it isn't always about low self-esteem, and sometimes it's what happens after you've tried to contort yourself and bend yourself to fit into a system and realizing you're never going to be accepted by it.
Yeah. So the literature to date, the kind of main narrative about imposter syndrome is a sense of feeling like you're a fraud, that you don't belong, that you're not as competent as everyone else, even though when you entered into the role, the sector, the training program, whatever the context, you were invited in because of you had enough, you were competent enough, skilled enough, whatever the criteria was, it was enough. And suddenly you go through, you spend a bit of time in a environment and you're feeling like opposite of that. You don't belong, you're a fraud, you're the imposter. And some people are an imposter because they get into spaces without having earned it, not through merit, but through other means. Nepotism, we can go into that.
Is something we've always struggled with in the fight. Yeah. I'm going to explore that a little bit more with you in a minute, but please, yeah.
So there's that part, the real imposter, but then the imposter syndrome is you go into a hierarchical system and there's a dominant expectations of how you're going to be, what you're going to do for it to make it look good, to, boost its reputation, help its revenue, its bottom line. And these are not always made explicit. So you're given your position description or whatever expectation, and you think, oh, that's the job. That's what I have to do. But there's always a hidden curriculum. It's the things that are unsaid, the unspoken, the rules that are there, that if you don't turn up this way, if you say things a certain way or you don't say them a certain way, you don't fit. You're a threat. You're an outsider.
I always say, the fire service says, be yourself. No, not like that.
Yeah. No, never be yourself.
We want diversity, but it's almost like we're not organizationally mature enough as to know what to do with that when we want different ideas. We want neurodiversity because it helps us overcome the challenges. Like the thinking that's brought you to this point won't help you get over the problems that you've created. But we don't know what to do with that when it comes in, do we?
Yeah. And that's, again, a whole other thing, because part of the problem is not understanding the problem. We think we understand it. We have surface level understanding, but we're not looking at all the influences, contributing factors. And diversity needs to be, we need to look at things from different perspective versus we need to just have all the ideas available. And somehow different people from different backgrounds will provide us with different ideas versus we need some skills to explore something from a number of different perspectives. And that way, new things can emerge, and it doesn't require new solutions. It might mean shifting something to no longer cause that problem and to do something differently. So, yeah.
How long can we reasonably expect people to sit in that messy middle of initially maybe feeling like they aren't competent and they don't know what to do, or they're not sure if they are in the right place, to then when that shifts, that when it shifts, when I was reading in your piece about this, and we'll there's so many notes we're going to put in this. The notes might be long. I might have to have a whole separate thing for the notes to send them to some of your incredible content. Diluting some of your words for topics I wanted to discuss was one of the hardest things. But anyway,
I'm sorry.
No. And that is, some people it's easier. Like there's only 5 things that people can talk about. But anyway, when it shifts into people not feeling accepted, that is a different, because then you're psychologically starting to lean away from the organization. It's like you've already left mentally then.
Well, not exactly, because I think many of us, speaking from experience, go through a process to still find a way to fit in, like find the acceptable way that will grant us access to higher levels in the hierarchy or, into certain groups. So it's not immediate. You feel it. So let's give an example. This happens a lot with medical training. Not that I've gone through medical training, but I've studied medical culture for a long time. And so they're the cream of the crop, chosen to come into this elite, very competitive training program. And then within the first year, many of them start to feel like they're all crap. So it's a huge shift from being, cream of the crop to everyone is shit here. And they don't necessarily talk about it. Or, disclose it openly because there's shame associated with that. We're supposed to be cream of the crop. I can't go around thinking that I'm the worst. That's not going to be good. I need to kind of perform. But you're going to try to find ways to blame yourself or make it your responsibility to do better. Because if you're feeling incompetent, then it must be something I'm doing wrong versus there must be something going on in the system that is telling me that I'm wrong or bad, and that keeps being reinforced. It's one thing to get feedback off of practice and like that you didn't do well versus it's the message I'm receiving all the time and I'm internalizing it and I'm making it part of my identity versus there's something systemic that doesn't seem right. And I'm able to kind of objectively assess my competence and look at what I'm able to do, not compare to other people, just compare to myself and, the scores and whatever the feedback I'm getting. You need to go through a process to, evaluate your own competence outside of the system. Then you could start to distinguish between, am I actually incompetent and I have some work to do and I need to get support to help me versus are these the messages from the system that I've just been bombarded with and now internalizing and it's becoming part of who I am? So as a response to that, then I'm going to try all these ways to try to improve myself to fit the system. And in doing so, I'm going to erase parts of myself that are not accepted by the system and try to adopt things that the system wants. And so I'm assimilating. And the imposter syndrome is sometimes the signal that I am not aligned with the system because, my way of showing up is not what the system wants, even though they chose me to attend.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Godiva Limited. Godiva is one of the world's leading providers of specialist equipment for emergency services market. Godiva produces a comprehensive range of fire pumps, including vehicle-mounted, portable, and their cutting-edge integrated total water flow control system, SAMFlows. I've been using Godiva my entire career as a reliable pump on the fire ground. It is such a crucial element of a successful firefighting team that you want to empower your crews with the very best, reliable, quality product. Reach out to our partners by checking the notes in the podcast. Now back to the show. So there's so many conflicting things. I mean, not in what you've just said, but I'm hearing this and it hurts in ways. The very manifestation of this, what we're doing, the very manifestation of the Firefighters podcast was realistically from a place of not feeling heard, understood, confused, things not making sense in my sector, and me wanting to speak to subject matter experts and get past the layers to understand the true why behind some of the stuff we're doing. So what you're saying there hurts a little bit, and I'm sure it might hurt other people when you go, right, okay, so so there's development and change. There's growth. We're all supposed, when you meet someone 3 years later and you go, hey, Natalie, you've changed. Yeah, we're supposed to, because we change and grow through our lives. But doing it through humility, self-awareness, and like a good moral compass maybe is a different thing to assimilating and I would say masking. I went through a period of recovery with Narcotics Anonymous, and for a period of time, obviously before that, I was a very functioning addict, and you would mask a lot and lie and many other of these elements of the dark triad, which maybe we'll get onto later. I feel like I still mask a lot, not through my addictions, but I do a lot of masking, perhaps due to some, there's the ADHD thing, which is diagnosed, but like there's some undiagnosed, but also I don't think that matters. Yes, if you have autism, dyslexia, blah, 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 having these things identified so workplaces in your own life can adapt for them is useful. How do we differentiate as a question which will manifest out of this, I promise, as you're guessing as to what direction I'm going in. What's the difference between growth development in a healthy way and assimilating and masking, which starts to feel a sense of internal incongruence?
Yeah, great question. And I think we all mask because if you're in any sort of institution that has a collection of people with a mission, vision that you didn't develop, maybe you had some role in developing, but you're not the one in charge of enforcing. You're not the one at
Yep.
the top.
Yep.
And that's the
It's not my
reality.
train. It's not mine.
No,
Yep.
exactly. So we're all going to mask, and we should, because they're not safe. We should be masking. There's no way to show up authentically in places like that and not be hurt by it. We're virtually going in unprotected.
Yeah, but it's exhausting though.
I know. Well, it's exhausting because you are putting on a performance in order to survive. However, if people become aware that there's the explicit curriculum of what I'm supposed to do here in this job, and there's an implicit hidden curriculum. And that's where the growth is. Because if I know this place is going to try to tempt me or push me, pressure me to do what it wants, it's going to ask me to violate some morals, not intentionally, not force it, but it's going to expect me to some degree to operate outside of maybe my moral framework. And so part of it, the maturation, is being very clear about what my moral framework is and where my boundaries are. And if there is a violation, that's on me, I guess, to work on that, as well as put responsibility on the organization. But they won't take responsibility a lot of the time. They'll deny it. And so you kind of are stuck with, how do I deal with this? The impact of, being a bystander for someone being bullied and not saying anything about it. Because I know if I say something, I'm going to get on that shit list too. And, that doesn't make things better for me, and it doesn't help that victim either. So I need to get wiser and strategic about how I work with these contexts so that I'm not hurt by it, but I'm also not violating my moral principles, because that will be exhausting. That will hurt me. That's a self-betrayal. Yeah. So it is like a contortion act. But once you start to see it, then you're like, I can work with this, and I can compartmentalize that, and I can be clear about what's mine and what's their responsibility. And I can't change what's theirs, but I can only control what I can do. But if you have a moral compass that you're connected to, you're not going to last as long as you would like in an organization like that doesn't take accountability. And that's the reality a lot of people don't like hearing.
That's hard to hear, though.
Yeah.
That's really hard. I'll be honest with you, because so with people in my sector, a regular question I ask now when we close, and it's not necessarily a question I'm asking you, but just to give you insight, is I say to people, is firefighting a job for life? And the romantics, including, and maybe I'm pleading for reassurance, for hope sometimes, because in its purest sense, it's fun. When we go out and do the thing, it's fun, it's meaningful, you get a massive sense of purpose, as I'm sure all people in the health sector and first responder sector can relate to. But it's all the other bits. It's all the other bits. It's the organizational, I'm going to call it trauma, that just feels really hard, really, really hard. Like, you take so much of it home with you. Right. I don't want to catastrophize on that point. Let's stay on task. Otherwise, we'll lose me into a personal therapy session.
No, but it's a good point. And I'm not suggesting, you can't work anywhere, but all organizations are set up this way. So the sooner we kind of accept this is how they are, the sooner then I can develop some inner resources or use my inner resources to work with it, to manage it. And so there's the parts of the work, as long as you love those parts, then you invest your energy into those parts. And the parts that suck, well, it's nothing to do with me. Yes, it contributes to problems, but the more I care about it and the more I put my energy into like wanting that to change and thinking that I have some say when it's not necessarily my say, because it would have already happened by now. because you're not the only one saying these things about
No.
change. So it's finding a way to be at peace with what you can control and what you can't. And really the things that light you up, that's where you put your energy. I mean, I've been through a similar thing, not obviously in fire rescue, but there's parts of the job that I loved and it, filled me up. And then there was the organizational bits that suck. And so I just kind of went, well, whatever. There's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to focus on what I can do and where I can have an impact. And that compartmentalization was saving grace for me. It wasn't as tiring.
So the people that could change it, the people that might change it, will change it, do change it for better and worse. And this might be a nice segue into weird people and narcissism. I often say, and I'm sure I always say there's no original thought. All of these are echoes and cocktails of people we've heard and spoken to before, from my words are anyway. And it's that the people that you want to change it the most are sometimes interested the least, as in there's a classical type A person that will go for the driven promotion and will end up in the seat to change the thing. But sometimes that could also become a self-perpetuating cycle of that person fits in most with the current structure, hence why they were able to progress within it, perpetuating the unlikelihood that it will change. So take me into narcissism and weird people. What are weird people? If this is a useful transition, if I've framed that correctly, and if not, please pivot me.
Yeah, it's quite a shift. Let me think of the link. Well, we're talking about hierarchy and structure. So you just described someone who's a very good assimilator. They are assimilated and they're very good at just reproducing the same things that assimilating systems love and trust. They're not a threat. And there's less incentive for them to make a change that will cause maybe a negative ripple effect for them. So they don't change, but they can tell you all the things that they want to change, but do everything to actively block it. So it's very confusing for people who believe this person and then see their actions are completely opposing. And it crushes their hope that, oh, this person's not the savior. They're just the same. They're just the system. Whereas others are the non-assimilators. They can't assimilate. Like someone like me, I've tried. It doesn't work. I won't be accepted by the system because I'm a little bit too disruptive, even when I downplay it.
You're very celebrated socially. You have a very, people really, I was referred to you by several people I have a lot of respect for, and previous guests, a couple of senior leaders, a good friend, Jan Morris, who went through a really terrible time in her own organization. So your views and your words resonate so heavily with so many people, which is sad, not because it's not good, but it's sad because it's so uncommon in their actual organization.
I think majority of people assimilate until they can't anymore and they get destroyed for no longer being able to assimilate. So what I've been writing about is scapegoating. That's what's gotten a lot of attention in the last few months. Scapegoating at work. And I don't think it's been described in workplace contexts, in intellectual spaces, into, professional spaces. It's understood as like, for us. Yeah. So scapegoating is a passing your blame onto a person so that you're projecting all your shadow, basically your envy, your shame, your resentments, all the things, your inadequacies onto an object outside of yourself. And you will do everything. And it's not you individually. It's a systemic response to this threat. The threat to the reputation or the image or the sanctity or whatever it is that hierarchy or that organization or system needs. So that person's seen as a threat, and there's a process that is not so obvious a lot of the time that basically marginalizes and alienates and eventually excludes that person, and it ruins their reputation in the process. So they're cast out carrying the sins of the system so the system can feel relief again once they're gone. But if the system doesn't reflect on its actions and why that person left because they're blaming that person for not being a good fit or causing problems when they asked a question to clarify something, then they don't change. So the scapegoating will continue. So some people can be brought in, recruited, the red carpet is rolled out, they're love bombed, they're seen as the savior, you're going to help us. And then in the process of doing the job that they've been asked to do, they might ruffle some feathers and, lo and behold, the scapegoating happens. So they get shocked because they might have had a career where they were, managed to do really well and be celebrated and develop a really strong reputation, which is why that organization, headhunted them and brought them in. But then they did the job that they were assigned, but that wasn't the job they wanted. They wanted to look a certain way, but not make any changes. But they didn't know that. That person didn't know that. So they go from being celebrated like the golden child to the scapegoat. And that's a shock to a lot of people when that happens, because that's their first time. So you can assimilate to a point, and then once you're confident with yourself and you challenge a system and it's the wrong system, then you have your downfall. And so I think a lot of people are waking up to that, and having it articulated is very powerful, because it's something that they feel and sense, and it's like an injustice, but they don't have evidence that they could have documented to prove that. So they just have no way of seeking justice. So they're left with this unfair, unjust, but no recourse. So I think that's why a lot of people are really resonating with the things that I've been saying about it, because it's giving language.
Rarely is it ever extraordinarily explicit. It's often very subtle and almost just cutting the legs out of their reputational value in very subtle just different ways across an organization over a sustained period of time. In very, like I say, non-obvious ways. But it
subtle,
just
covert. That's why people don't know. So covert bullying, covert narcissism, scapegoating is all covert, but it's very similar, not the same, but there's similarities to narcissistic abuse, which is more obvious.
What is narcissism? Because there's a great article you have around these 13 ways to recognize one. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents, and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
So narcissism, the way it's commonly described, is about personality traits. So we hear of narcissistic personality disorder, which is one of the cluster B disorders that describes a set of traits that is attention seeking, pulling all the attention on themselves, making it all about themselves, low empathy, but can come across as really charming and charismatic. And that's how they get attention. But it's basically just feeding an unmet need for attention and affection and importance and entitlement. And there are people who fall for it. So you can end up in a relationship with someone like that, and they basically drain your life. So at first they love bomb you, they, idealize you. Then over time you do the wrong thing. Like you challenge them. You said something that interfered with their, very fixed, rigid, ideal self-image. And that's when they turn on you. They're like, oh, I can't trust you anymore. And then they go through this process of, again, ruining your reputation, recruiting other people to hate on you. And eventually, you get discarded, or sometimes you stay stuck in a idealization, devaluation cycle for a long time. And eventually you have to leave, or you're discarded first. So not that different to the scapegoating, idealization, devaluation, discard cycle, but there are more elements because it's systemic versus an individual. And so narcissism, so that's the kind of personality profile, but we all have narcissistic traits, all of us. And
I was about to say, I want to zoom back out to the content, but I want to make this useful to people because, and I want to be honest. I always want to be honest. How do I know I'm not a narcissist?
Are you able to Well, are you able to reflect on your actions and then feel remorse or regret or shame and then go,
Chronically so, to the
I don't
extent
want
that
to
it
do
keeps
this
me up
anymore?
at
Okay.
night.
Then
Through things
I
in the
can't,
past, through addictions, through
yeah.
failed businesses, through ways I perceive people have or haven't felt by my interactions with them. I
So I can't assess anyone. I'm not a
no, I'm
clinician.
not, but
And,
yeah.
but if you
But I
have
run a
the
podcast all
capacity,
the time, and a lot of
yeah,
this might be considered as narcissistic, and that's why I'm trying to at least invite that. So we're not talking about people that aren't here. Just
yeah.
try and be honest.
Yeah, but having a podcast, unless you're making it your whole identity and I need this for me and my glorification. If you're doing that, then yeah, you're higher end of the, you're leaning into your narcissistic traits. But if you're here out of being of service and part of it requires your visibility but you're kind of doing it for you, but you're doing it for others, then it's less
I
leaning
try
on the
to make it
narcissism.
all about the guest.
Yeah.
But I think the purpose of a podcast is it's a conversational thing. So
Yeah.
there are all elements that it's not an interview. I always say it
Yeah.
bleeds. Podcast hosts bleed. They leak
Yeah.
into the conversation unknowingly. It's
Yeah.
part of building rapport, but it's hard to know when you're around someone that, like you said, everyone could have narcissistic tendencies, but are they conscious and are they used for manipulation?
Okay, here we
Knowingly?
go. Yeah. So the way I talk about narcissism is interpersonal because we're not these individuals living in these little huts away from the rest of humanity. Everything that we experience is social, it's interpersonal. So what I talk about narcissism, I think about, again, hierarchies, dominance, domination, control, power, because that's what it's essentially about. Having attention, the spotlight. It's like, I have power. Nobody can touch me when I'm here. So I could go into like developmental, how does this happen, which I don't want to because it takes away from understanding that my attempt to dominate you so I feel more secure because something about you is making me feel inferior and inadequate. I'm going to do all these behaviors to try to overpower you and assert my dominance so that I am higher again on the hierarchy and I start to feel better about myself. So we do all sorts of things unconsciously most of the time. Like when we get defensive, when someone gives us feedback or even a criticism, we go into defense mode because our shame response is activated versus, okay, well, that's your perspective. I'm really curious of how you arrived to that. Can you share a specific example of what I said or did and the impact? I'm just wondering, we don't necessarily go through this zooming out and getting objective process.
You have
we
to create
react.
mental space to do that.
Yeah,
It's very hard in the moment to hit that
It
reset
is.
button and zoom out to the helicopter view.
But in being defensive and then going, well, no, you said this and therefore that's why I did that and you're bad. This is my attempt to put myself in a more superior position so I can feel better again about myself. So these are elements of narcissistic behavior. It's not necessarily conscious. It's not now you're a dark triad person. I'm trying to feel safe. I'm trying to restore a sense of self where I know the rules of the world and how it operates, and I can feel like in control again. So it's not coming from a bad place. But if you think about organizations, the scapegoating, these are all unconscious behaviors, which is why it makes it so hard to even talk about and pinpoint because it's not intentional. Not most of the time.
I've had this with members of human resources stuff like when I'm trying to describe something. They go, be specific, Pete. You're not, where? Give us an example. And I'm just like, I can't put it into words, and it's, you don't want to generalize in some catastrophizing manner, but you're like, is it me? And then you start to feel like you're losing your mind.
Yeah, you do think you're crazy because so much of it is subtle, is covert, which is why I'm giving language to a process, looking at when someone says this, it's not just the words. Imagine the motive behind it. What are they trying to do? And so if you see enough of the same thing repeating, you start to see a pattern. So I talk about patterns. And then where you could go to the HR person and go, this is the pattern. These are the things. But unless the HR person is well-versed on these covert tactics, they might just go, you're being sensitive or you're just making a big deal out of nothing. So you can't win sometimes. But a lot of this stuff that we do is unconscious. They're reactions to feeling insecure, inferior. It's what I called it. Well, not I call, but it's what is known as like a shame response. And a way I soothe myself is doing whatever I need to do to feel superior again, feel like I'm in control. And so everyone does that. This is not just the narcissist or the
Yeah.
borderline personality, or we all do this. This is part of, dealing with threat. Even though our life might not be threatened, there's something about our image,
I was
our
about to say,
yeah,
as we've sort of evolved from cave people or whatever your beliefs on evolution are, we're no longer facing life or death threats every day. So much of our perceived fatal threats are more social.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we feel like losing face is us dying in our respected community. And if our community excludes us, then
yeah,
historically that would have meant death, because they are our
yeah,
resource. They are our source of dopamine and love and acceptance.
exactly. So we've managed to replace the community or the tribe and that hierarchy with the organization. That becomes a sort of surrogate parent that we want to please and seek approval from and acceptance and belong. And not pleasing it is, again, linked to this sense of survival. And, oh my goodness, I have to then morph myself to assimilate so that I'm protected, because it provides us with our security. It provides us with, reinforces an ideal image, a better identity, that our profession gives us. It gives us a lot of things that are not actually healthy, because we shouldn't be tasking the organization to do that for us in the first place, because it's not a thing
Yeah.
and it doesn't care
Is
about
this
you.
no, absolutely. There's something I remember a long, long time ago, very old speak. Simon Sinek spoke about it when he spoke about, historically we would give alphas first choice of meat, first choice of mate, because when the horrific thing happened, when the tribe was under threat, the alpha would step up and defend the tribe. And I think there's some incongruence, some difficulty that we have these days sometimes when our leaders, who are most financially rewarded, who are often most respected, most, admired in their organizations, are their ideas are agreed with most. When threat comes or when something bad happens and some responsibility is needed to be taken, when we don't see them exhibit those behaviors, I think that can be sometimes the most difficult part for people who have given themselves to this thing under a belief that they will be protected by
Yeah.
the alpha in that world.
Yep, I agree with that, because we
Mm,
are hierarchical. If we look
mm,
at our first relationships we've had in our life with parents or caregivers, they weren't equal. They're hierarchical. We needed them in order for our survival, or at least one of them for our survival. So that is imprinted in us. That's our programming. So we're always going to look to the parent figure, that authority, for protection and safety. But that's on us to stop doing that with people who that's not their responsibility. But we're primal, like it's just our nature.
mm.
So part of, developing resilience is to start going, okay, I don't need approval from this person. I don't need their validation. I don't need their acceptance. I'm here to do a job, and I'm here to be excellent and do my best at this job. And yes, their approval obviously matters if I'm in training and they're my supervisor and they're
Yeah.
responsible for my ability to get promoted and complete a program. But when that's not the case, when you're trying to ascend a ladder, you have to encounter these people who will want you to stroke their egos in order to get ahead, or will want you to be agreeable in order to get ahead, or they will be hopefully ethical and you can be more yourself and work
Our
well
stuff
and
is
get ahead.
steeped in this. Honestly,
Yeah,
Nally, it's steeped
yeah,
in this with the rank, command and control. We work in a command and control structure. People walk around with ranks on their shoulders when realistically they don't need to, unless we're actually at an operational incident. It leaks into so much of the organizational world, things that should solely live in a usefully hierarchical system on an emergency incident ground, where we do need to all agree who the decision maker is. And we
yeah,
all need to agree and march to the beat of the same drum. But that doesn't need to be the case in the organization. That's why I wonder if these professions are places where there's so much leak. I feel like so much of it is leaking over.
Yeah. Well, because from what you're saying and from what, I've come to see, people's profession are, intertwined with identity. And so
We're
some people,
terrible at it.
and the only place where they feel like they're respected is their workplace.
Yeah.
And so they have to, do the rank
My
and order
joke is
thing.
always, how do you know if you're around a firefighter? Don't worry, they'll tell you. Because they're so proud of it. It's so much of their identity, and they're probably so with paramedics and doctors and
But it's
police,
beautiful because you're doing important work, right? You're doing important work, but when you make something part of your identity, when you retire, what do you have left?
Death of an identity when people retire is massive.
Yeah. And
massive.
why is it surprising then that so many, take their own lives? Because they don't feel like they have a purpose anymore, and they haven't prepared to create a well-rounded life where they're not investing in only their identity that the profession gives them. They're investing in so many other things that if they lose the profession, they won't be completely destabilized, and they'll have other things that give them meaning in their life.
I wonder if this podcast thing is actually a secret coping mechanism for that, for myself, and I just don't realize it. If I retire or leave the profession, I still feel connected to it, and I can still keep speaking to people even after I stop doing it. So I wonder if this is just a big coping mechanism to prepare me for retirement one day. I wanted to ask about alphas who pose as betas. That is the first time I'd ever heard it framed in that way. And again, you frame things so incredibly beautiful. Your ability to give words and articulate the felt sense of so many people. What does that look like? MSA are supporting us on today's podcast, and I chose to partner with them because I've been wearing this stuff for nearly 20 years, and they are the global leader in development, manufacture, and supply of incredible, safe products that really protect people, not just our communities out there, but also first responders, most importantly, all over the world. Get yourself over to MSA and have a look at it. The high-performance protective clothing for emergency services responders. They also partner with us on the UK Pink Firefighters. That's because we love them. The helmets with the reflective visor, the F1XF, absolutely epic helmet. And not forgetting how they improve firefighter safety through their connectivity in the connected firefighter platform. MSA are always pushing the envelope, and it's a real privilege to be able to continue to grow our partnership together. So whether it's your PPE, your bunker gear, your helmets, your SCBA, your thermal imaging, your Luna, or your portable gas detection, both of us know that this equipment needs to work. It needs to be high quality, reliable, and dependable in the moment. And that's why I use MSA, because they know what's at stake.
Well, so we're talking about the alpha, beta, down to sigma, I guess, hierarchy.
We know nothing about that.
Okay.
What are these things?
So it's
People
another hierarchy.
Probably, but
yeah. So if you look at the animal kingdom, the animal that has, the most, power in the group is the protectors, the alpha. And in humans, a lot of men want to be the alpha. And the ones who don't want to be the alpha, either because they acknowledge, I can't be the alpha, so they kind of get themselves out of the hierarchy or have no problem being kind of lower in the hierarchy. That way they don't have to strive. But men, especially if you look at, adolescents, boys, everyone's trying to compete for, top dog. This is part of human nature again. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just how we are. And we want to protect the social order. And so what I talked about is the man. So it's referring to men who come across as very safe, especially to women, and some men, because they, seem to exude this empathy, that they are good listeners, they are reflective, they, will take you seriously and make you feel good by being around them. And so you let your guard down around somebody like that because they seem safe and they're kind of appealing, especially to women, to the things that they love. Especially they want that from men. So it's a feminized way of expressing, themselves. And so it's disarming. For some, for me, I see that as suspicious because I'm like, what's your agenda?
Yeah, what are you trying?
Yeah. And that's the alpha
I worry
part.
if I exude that sometimes. I genuinely worry about that.
Well, let's see.
Go on. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
No.
My ADHD is terrible.
No, it's okay. the alpha, so the alpha part is the man who likes to be in charge. He's the top dog. So he puts on the beta, gets on, and I'm not for a second saying this person's doing it intentionally. These are adaptations to whatever's happened in their life that they see, this works for me. This is going to get me where I want to go. And so this is just how I am. But I don't think they calculate anything and like decide, I'm going to be like this so I get the attention. It's just unconscious. So majority of the time, there are obviously exceptions. So he's basically the alpha. He is the one who wants to be in charge, who wants to have the name, who wants to have the visibility, and nothing is going to get in the way of that. But his way of appealing to people and getting people on side, especially women, to be his like protectors and his cheerleaders, is to disarm them using more feminine kind of, relational qualities, which is not how you normally think about men. It's not very masculine. It's more feminine. So it's feminized, female-coded approaches to relating with people. And but as soon as you challenge that person, the daggers come out, but they come out in a female-coded way. So passive-aggressive, soft control, which is another thing I described in detail. So using language in a way to make you doubt yourself and make you think like, I'm not a good person. But they didn't say I'm not a good person. They didn't come out, they didn't assert that.
You gave a great written example of this. I think you did it on International Women's Day, didn't you?
You spoke
about soft control.
Yeah.
That's a great article.
Thank you. So it's a way, it's a female-coded way. I'm not saying all women do this, but this is a more female.
When I read through it, I was like, oh my God, I see that.
Yeah, men do it too, like lots of men.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of passive aggression, but it's an intent to assert control and dominance. Always about dominance. Humans want to dominate, but they do not want to be dominated. So except for, again, there's always exceptions, but that's our nature because then we're safe. If we're in charge, we know what's going on, we're in control, then, we know what to do.
Is there any way for this to have manifested authentically? And obviously I'm going to scream for my own bias here and say I have a sister same age as me. I have a daughter, and I grew up around a lot of women predominantly, but I'm also, people might look at me and see many alpha traits. I'm the 6'5" white male. I do all the firefighter challenge stuff. I obviously enjoy speaking confidently on a public platform, but I feel most comfortable when I'm in less alpha environments because I don't have to have a cock off, if you know what I mean. There isn't a competitive gotcha all of the time. That almost makes me feel a bit anxious, to be honest, sometimes when I'm in those environments. But I don't ever want my natural affinity, because obviously spending time with my daughter, and I've spent time, she's my daughter, those traits never would have worked anyway. So I feel like just through the whole nature nurture thing, I feel like I've just developed some of those traits. Not saying I'm good at any of them, but in order to sustain a relationship with my sister and my daughter, a healthy one where we really enjoy being around each other, those things have come to me because they've had to be developed. But then I don't want them ever to feel manipulative if I deploy them unconsciously in an organizational thing. I mean, the podcast is a thing where I can just talk to anybody really comfortably and I enjoy it, but it doesn't really matter if it does well or not because it's not monetized. It's just a thing that I enjoy and people take value from. Can it possibly be authentic, or do you think people knowingly deploy these things for manipulation?
I think it can be authentic, and I think it can be also inauthentic and strategically employed to control and manipulate people, which, then falls into the traits of the dark triad because they're all intentional control.
Take me to the dark triad. We'll keep pausing for a second, but you mentioned it now because it's on my list and I want to bring it up in a minute, but sorry, carry on. That's
Well,
crazy.
that's not my area of expertise because for me, I like the covert and subtle and naming it and giving language because that's the majority of the things that contribute to our nuisance, our irritation and frustration and the bad things that happen. They're covert before they become overt. So the dark triad, the traits are again manipulation, calculation, ruthlessness. Depends. There's four. There's the dark tetrad actually. So sadism, Machiavellianism, narcissist, psychopathy. So they're not pleasant, and you do get psychopaths in certain, especially in certain industries like finance.
Yeah.
Lots of stockbrokers who fall into the psychopathy range because that's the culture as well that promotes it, elevates it. You need some cutthroat people, but you don't have to be cutthroat to other people.
Do you ever remember the hair test? Is it called the hair test? There was a doctor or a psychologist who was asked to assess psychopaths and sociopaths in prisons. And they said, "Oh, we want to test the population," and came out something like 90-something%, and that was no surprise. But then to test it properly, they put it onto society, and they tested a bunch of people, and it showed that people at higher levels of organizations attribute psychopathic and sociopathic tendencies because they're able to do things like switch on and off their empathy. They can be impulsive or reckless. They chronic deceitfulness or manipulativeness. And it aids them. They're likely never to kill someone. We think of a psychopath. We go, "Oh God, stay away from
serial killer."
Around the street serial killer running around with a gun or a knife.
Yeah.
But I would imagine the vast majority of people with those tendencies, it's probably useful to them, and therefore perpetuates that sort of self-reward loop of these behaviours. I'm not killing anybody, Natalie.
Yeah,
But
I'm not kidding. I'm just totally screwing a lot of people over.
In your opinion,
yeah, exactly. So that's one end. You've got the people who behave that way and are intentional about it, and they get away with it. And the other part is the lack of accountability. Where are the measures that are enforced to kind of contain somebody like that? Because they shouldn't be in high-powered positions where they're causing harm, but if they're doing good things for the organization and making it look good, well, then that's what matters to the narcissistic organization because they're, psychopathic to a degree as well, depending on the organization. So the people who thrive are reflections of the ideal self-image of the organization, but they will never say that. They will never put that in their mission statements and vision statements and values. That's the problem. So you have to see the propaganda, the thing they want you to believe and that they want to believe in themselves, and the real stuff, how it's what is being done, what is said and done is incongruent with these, this value system. And then you're like, okay, then it's no surprise. Why would I trust this organization when they're doing everything that is opposing their supposed, values? So again, it's on us.
That really worried me or really stood out to me on that list of, I think there was 7 different elements of the signs of a dark personality. Empathy. Most specifically, empathy erosion or empathy fatigue is something I've seen written about before from the first responder sector. You deal with so many very difficult things in this world, in my role and in everybody's role. They will see the worst, most deprived, challenged, socioeconomically vulnerable members of our community. And you will just see some horrific stuff. People hurt, people maliciously hurt, arsonists setting fire to homes, killing families, children, firefighters, other first responders losing their lives. And it feeds the pessimist. It feeds the belief that humanity is doomed, that we're not looking after each other. Look at what some of these people do to each other. And then in my own organization, you see examples, as in for that person, they'll say, in my own organization, I see this and I see what was happened to so-and-so, and I see the lack of support they were given. And so I think a lot of us in this sector will suffer from empathy fatigue, and coming home and your partner says, You won't believe that Stephanie at work ate my sandwich out of the fridge today, and you go, fucking hand, who cares?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And you don't want to be that person, because you want to empathize and you want to feel for these people. But how does the optimist survive these things?
Yeah. So how do you prevent your give a shitter
Yeah.
from breaking?
Yeah. Great way to put it.
Yeah, that was my doctoral supervisor. He's like, "Oh, my give a shitter is broken." So
yeah, well, it's easily, or at least some days it will misfire and just go, "Oh, yeah, it's not working today."
We can't be empathetic all the time. It does require a lot of energy. Okay, well, there's again, empathy is a double-edged sword. Every quality has like a dark side to it, and like when you can go into excess. So I talk about empathy, compromised empathy, misguided empathy. And so empathy is needed to be able to try to understand someone else's point of view, where they're coming from. You get curious. You're trying to imagine what it's like for them without trying to put yourself in their shoes, because you can't do that. But you're trying to get and I don't have to agree with them. So if you say, I think it's okay for people who, set fires to get their hands chopped off. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, you think that that's a reasonable thing given the kind of crime? Yeah, I could see that. Doesn't mean I agree with you, but I'm like, or I start asking, where did this come from? So what has happened that led you to this conclusion? I can be curious. So
understanding someone doesn't mean agreeing with them.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily understand someone. You're trying to imagine what it's like for them without needing to put yourself in their shoes, because you can't. We can't. Everyone has different interpretations of experiences. Even if we experience the same event, we're going to have different perspectives on it or different feelings about it. So I can see that this would be annoying for you or be upsetting for you. Like I can see that without needing to feel it. And some people feel that in their body too, which comes with its own cautions, because we shouldn't necessarily, because we have to be able to distinguish between what's someone else's and what's my own. Yeah. So that's empathy. It requires a number of skills, and people talk about cognitive empathy and emotional empathy. So cognitive empathy, you can totally fake. So I could be the psychopath. I'll be like, tell me what was like. Tell me about your day. Yeah, that sounded really hard. Someone ate your sandwich. What an ass. Yeah. I can't believe that. Yeah. So how does that make you feel? They can do all the things that come across like they're caring, and you feel, wow, I feel seen. They're paying attention to me. But you could see that there's also a script if you're tuned into it, and you're like,
Do you have to deploy cognitive empathy though? Because I don't work at senior leadership level in my organization. I'm a very low level leader. If you are faced with things that are massive, big, expensive catastrophes on a day-to-day basis, I'm trying to be forgiving and generous in this framework and say, is that not just a survival mechanism? Because if the prime minister or the president or whoever had to really catastrophize and get stuck in the thralls of all of the things that land on their desk, they never get anything done. It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefighters podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. But here's the honest truth. It takes a colossal amount of time and work to keep the podcast going. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. Now, by joining this, you'll not only support the future of the podcast, but also gain access to exclusive benefits. Now, if you've ever wanted to meet a member of the podcast, buy us a beer, buy us a coffee, and you think anything you've ever listened to on the podcast has been worth £3, that's basically what we're asking you for. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behaviour, firefighter health, cancer risks, instant debriefs, and so much more. A growing collection of valuable resources to help you learn and grow. Your support in whatever way, dropping it in the WhatsApp group, sharing it on the local newsletter, whatever it is, it's incredibly valuable, and we really do support it, and we need it to make it a long-lasting resource, that legacy resource we always talk about for first responders, firefighters, and everybody everywhere who's ever been interested in joining the fire service. Now, if you're already supporting something, as many people do, it's totally cool. You can still access the podcast for free, and you'll always be able to access all the new episodes for free. But we're asking for your help to make this sustainable. And we want to keep growing, we want to keep sharing the insights, and we want to keep showcasing the incredible work happening in our community and our sector. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes.
So cognitive empathy is a way, I mean, there's so many understandings, but the way I've learned and try to understand how to work with it is that if I spend all this time talking to you about your feelings about someone taking your sandwich, you're not going to come out of that feeling. You're not going to come in with some understanding about your situation. You're just going to be in the depths of doom and gloom, and I'm going to join you there. Whereas if I go, I wonder what's going on for the person who ate your sandwich. What could have been happening? And then you could find a way to make light of it and like move on. Or it sounds like, the value that's really important to you is consideration. And this is kind of highlighting that that's an important thing for you. So you're showing a strength. So there's different ways of working with that person. So you help them move through this feeling. You're not trying to push them out of it. You're being there with them, but you're helping them explore their experience in a way that shows them multiple perspectives than the shitty kind of doom and gloom. So that's, because otherwise we're only going to notice the crappy things that happen. And then that brings us down. And what that does is it erodes our empathy. We become desensitized to all the crazy things because we see it all the time. And we're like, yeah, okay. So another house burned down, another family died. Let's work. That's life. And so you become, unfortunately, dehumanized because your empathy is required to maintain your humanity and to feel what it's like, or to even wonder what it might be like for the other person. So if you have these traumatic experiences or experiences where you've been betrayed, which is like the workplace scapegoating, what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
You kind of disconnect, you stop trusting, because with every betrayal, you're like, I can't trust this world. I can't trust the way even I think and see things, my intuition. It misled me. So you kind of disconnect and disengage.
That's difficult, isn't it? Because an organization is just a collection of individuals. But when you get a few repeated patterns and touch points and connections with this thing, you stop making it personal. Which sometimes you should, as not as impersonal to you, you go, oh no, that's just the way Natalie treated me. That is not the fire service is evil. Well, the fire service, I always say to people, the fire service isn't even a thing. It's just a collection of people. The badge, and that's the reason I think the podcast happened, is because I'm more interested in the people than I am in the thing, because it's the people that make the people the greatest asset. The people manifest the thing. Do you know what I mean? But sometimes we can generalize and go, this thing is manipulative. This thing is against me. This thing is, this thing doesn't care.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that we fall back in to protect ourselves. We go into black and white thinking and we make ourselves the victim and the other thing, the perpetrator. And it's like, no, there's other ways of seeing the situation. But in the moment, I go into victim because that's my default. That's I need to protect myself here. And so I'm going to be not the one at fault. Not that anyone was at fault. It's about what were the conditions in place that contributed to this outcome? What did I contribute? What did the other person? What did the organization contribute? There's so many contributing factors. What were the barriers? What were the enablers? Lots of ways. So I need cognitive empathy to be able to even ask those questions of somebody and get them exploring their situation. But they also need to be in a place where they can think. And when you're feeling the emotion of something, you can't think. You're in it. It's intense. You need to help people
you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. You just, you're there. You're in the grip of it.
So you need to be able to vent that emotion and kind of offload it, get it out of your system, get the thoughts and feelings, the shame and all the stuff that you're feeling right now out so you can feel relief. And hopefully you're doing it with someone who won't shame you for feeling these things or saying those things, that they're like, yeah, get it out. Let's go. They encourage you. They want, they're there supporting you.
Once I've vented a few times. And I want to maybe we'll look to wrap this up because we've smashed an hour already, and I want to be respectful. So I would love,
keep going
to have you keep coming on. I'd love to have you on. How do either me as an individual, you as a person, how do we start to transition out of that victimhood? Because it's not very empowering. And it can just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. This cyclic vortex of self-loathing and worthlessness can just get out of control. And we need, because people can read so much of your stuff, and I know that if they are not already, they'll go on and read so much of this. It's fantastic. It's really deployable. But I love in many of the articles, you frame an element of, so what? Do you know what I mean? What can that person do to start? They're right. They're validated. They're heard.
Yeah.
So what?
Now what? Yeah. So, we help others then go, okay, now that you have more of an understanding of what contributed to the situation, what can you do about it, if anything? Maybe you just needed to have a reframe. Maybe, and usually if you're doing it well, you're listening well, and you're helping them explore, and you're being very curious in your inquiry, the solution will come to them. That's the beautiful thing about that, when you have that empathic capacity. And, it can help sometimes some people feel in their body the emotion of the other person. The mistake is to narrate that emotion, to go, oh, I think this is what you're feeling because because I'm using my lens of what it's like for me.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, I can feel that I could feel that resentment, or I can feel the pain of that. So some people have that ability. Lots of people have that ability. A lot of people shut it off because it's too much. And some people believe in it too much that they kind of use it to take control of the other person's narrative and kind of guide them according to where they want that person who's upset to go. So that's empathy misuse, I would say. Even though it's coming from a good place, it's not. You have
to remember what that will look like. If we put that back into the frame of the leader, manager, organization. I want you to be useful again, Natalie. How do I make you useful again?
Yeah.
Because you're not on a deal at the minute. I need you to be useful. If you do choose to leave, we're probably not going to be friends. And so for us to maintain our relationship, any capacity, you need to keep working here. And ergo, how do I get you to useful again? Which I don't think necessarily always correlates to what might be most helpful to you from a long-term well-being perspective.
Yeah. Unfortunately, like what I described doesn't have to take an hour. It can take a few minutes. Sometimes someone just needs space to just say the thing that feels so shameful to say. And it's like, okay, I'm feeling a little, and I'm not being punished for it. Okay, I'm feeling a little bit better. All right. So what can we do about this? How can I support you to move through this? Like proactive. And then there's the misguided empathy, where you only identify with the person's victimhood, or the victim group of, your favorite group that is disadvantaged or vulnerable, or whatever lens you put on them. And you appeal to them, and at the same time, you dismiss the suffering of another group because you're like, oh, but they're privileged. So you are selectively empathizing. So I would suggest that there's already compromised empathy for you to have to do something like that. And some groups behave very badly that I'm not going to empathize with them because what they're doing is pure evil. And we can have all the explanations. The fact is they're still doing evil things. So I'm not empathizing. So I can have, boundary. There's some limits to my empathy, and now it's time for accountability.
Yes.
So the empathy,
that
too much
deployed passion from someone's felt sense of injustice can get seriously unprofessional at times. And sometimes when you see some of these different communities, different projects, different purposes, campaigns, whatever they might be, you go, I can't hear what you're saying because of the way you're saying it. Do you know what I mean? Because of how you're communicating this, it just can become almost toxic. And then too many people are quiet just to pacify the few.
Yep.
That can be very common. And we see that in politics and society, in the news all the time.
Everywhere.
We go, whoa.
So people are more than signaling, look how virtuous I am. Look how empathetic I am because I care so much about this group, but screw the other group.
Yeah.
No, you're using that group for your own narcissistic needs to glorify yourself. So,
I see it.
And you'll see it in your profession too.
Mhm.
Like I'm
White
a
men.
firefighter. I'm so important. Look at this amazing. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
stop,
but I see
stop.
it with men, the thing where we talk about gender pay gaps and things like that, and let's write. And I hate even, but I hate doing what I'm about to do, which is I sort of caveat or like apologize ahead of what I'm about to say, which is, look, I do loads of work with women in the fire service and loads of underrepresented groups and da 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 da. However, when we talk about pay gaps or unfair treatment and men at the tops of higher organizations, I go, yes, there's also more men in prison. There's also more men who kill themselves. Is that a genetic element of a man's risk appetite and things like that? I personally believe in many ways we have created equity, not just equality. We've created equality in not everywhere, not everywhere. And again, I don't know because I'm speaking from my own bias. Come on, I've unseen privilege, all of that. But there are a lot of these things are affecting all of us as well. They're affecting all of us. They're not just a certain particular gender, religion, unrepresented or small underrepresented group. And I just go, white males aren't the answer to every problem, as in they're not the cause of every
Yeah,
problem. We
yeah,
can't
I agree.
keep punching that narrative down because
Yeah.
also you then can push them away from being part of the solution. Because if you just label
Well,
them as a problem, I've made it very
yeah.
specific about white males today.
No,
I'm
but
sure I'm going
yeah,
to get
no.
bashed for that, but it's
Well,
just one thing
that's
because I do a lot of stuff
yeah.
with men's mental health as well, and suicide is just obscene.
Well,
And
suicide
it's
rate
like,
hasn't gone down. Incarcerated men, it's a problem, and it's our collective problem. It's not
I
just
feel like if
yeah,
any other group has a problem, society says, "What can we do about this?" If
yeah.
white men have a problem, they go, "What are you going to do about that? That seems a you problem." I'm like,
Well,
"Come on."
yeah. So it's a product of, I guess,
We're
political
apologizing for
ideologies.
so much stuff in the past,
Yeah,
and there has been some horrific stuff done by white males.
yeah.
Horrific, probably
Well,
most of the
this,
worst things in history.
of course, but like everyone's done bad stuff until they've had awakenings and enlightened
Yeah,
themselves, hopefully, and we can't just blanket all all are bad, all are good. So how do people get out of the victimhood if they're bombarded with messages from society that they're bad because they have privilege and everyone else is
yeah,
oppressed? You can't get out of that. And so, but you're not allowed to be a victim because
no, no,
like,
no. How
so you
dare you?
can't win. So you can't win. But you asked the question before of like, how do people who end up in their victimhood state to get out of it? Well, first you have to be aware that this is what's happening, where you're like assigning blame to something external to you without you're not saying, I'm going to own the whole thing, but I'm going to look at how did I contribute to the situation? I
Definitely.
didn't, not the cause, because there's lots of different aspects, but how did I contribute? And when you're able to get into that place, you're able to move out of the victimhood. Unfortunately, victimhood for the last few years, certain victim groups have been seen as sacred and they've been celebrated for their victimhood because some other groups of people can use that victim group for their own elevation. Look how good I am supporting and advocating and being an ally for that group. So
Yeah,
it has reinforced a sense of victimhood and a lowering of expectations about each other. And that has led to social erosion, because when you have a group who are now protected from accountability, the consequences of their behavior because they're victims, then
hmm
there's no recourse. Then they can continue to do all sorts of things. And then that gives permission for other people to just behave in the same way because look what they get away with. So we've lost the, societal norms. We've lost basically the trust that we have with each other. This is how we behave when we don't trust each other. Just like in an toxic institution, just like in a, screwed up relationship, it's no different. So,
yeah.
yeah. So I think getting out of victimhood is first you have to know that you're in it and you give yourself a time frame. Like, I'm going to indulge in this for a few minutes, let myself feel it, because if you have been victimized, yeah, feel it. But then you can't stay there because then you can't take control over yourself. You have agency. Use it.
Agency is a massive topic, and I feel like we're training a lot of learned helplessness and an almost lack of agency in the way that we interact with our organization and tradition. I think tradition is a very difficult one in our service. I often think science and academia they say it progresses one funeral at a time. When someone passes and that no longer becomes the recognized theme of something. I think it's very similar in our organizations where things will progress, like tactical options or things like that will progress in the sector when people retire, and it's very difficult for people to continue to make progress or continue to persevere with positive change in the face of a very glacial approach from organizations, because change takes time.
It does take time, and it takes effort. Agency.
Agency.
Well, yeah.
I want to delve into so many other topics. I want to be respectful of our time because I know I've got another one up in about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yes,
we're going to direct people to your site, to your LinkedIn, to your Substack. I would love in 3, 4, 5, 6 months time, whatever it might be, to come back and review, because your capacity and output is really, really impressive. Like, I wonder how much mental space you have to create in order to give you. I always say we're too impatient to be intelligent. The amount of time you must have to. This must be a learned skill. How you help to think about the things that you think about, like the second order thoughts. Because I struggle to put words to probably many of the things that you write about that I've felt.
Thank you. I think, well, I'm not in a high adrenaline profession where you're kind of like thinking on your feet and having to act. I've been lucky to be in a profession where I get to reflect and have a process of reflecting, but I'm also very good at seeing patterns and like at being able to connect disparate things and find the common thread. So once you see you're able to do this, then you can't unsee things. You kind of, not that I'm looking for connections, but there's just things that come together and reveal themselves. And there it is. And I just report on it. And the fact that it resonates, and it doesn't resonate with everyone, but there's strong resonance. It's like, okay, I'm onto something. I'll keep going. Thank you. Yeah.
Natalie, I absolutely love that. I would love to have you on again. If people want to find you, I say the notes below, we'll put you to LinkedIn, to Substack and everything like that. Please send my love to the family and everybody. And I've really enjoyed our time together this morning.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, live with intention, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.